Fractions and decimals. How do you teach math to a chicken? Show it lots of egg samples. Today's lesson is fractions and decimals. We're going to be converting between fractions and decimals. The Indiana Academic Standard is 7.1.7. Now let's take a look at some vocabulary. A terminating decimal is a decimal that stops or ends. When I think of the word terminating, I think of the movie The Terminator. The job of the Terminator was to stop or end life. So you can think of a terminating decimal as a decimal that stops or ends. A repeating decimal is a decimal that has a block of digits that repeats without ending. Both terminating decimals and repeating decimals can be written as fractions. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we discuss rational and irrational numbers. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to finish this part of the notes. Now we're going to practice changing some fractions into decimals. To change a fraction into a decimal, divide the numerator by the denominator. For our first example, states the total amount of rainfall yesterday was reported as 1/4 inch. Write this fraction as a decimal. So we're going to have 1 divided by 4. 4 can't go into 1, so we write a 0 above the 1. We're going to have to put a decimal point in the problem, so that goes right straight up into the answer. Then 4 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. We subtract and get 2. Then we bring down the 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times. So 1/4 is equal to 0.25 or 25 hundredths. So the total amount of a rainfall as a decimal is 25 hundredths. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to finish this part of the notes. Don't forget to write a question. I will be checking this in class tomorrow. Now let's take a look at another problem. This one we already know is going to end up being a repeating decimal, but we're still going to divide like we did before. We're going to write 7/15 as a decimal. So we're going to take 7 and divide by 15. 15 cannot go into 7, so we put our 0 at the top. We place a decimal point in the problem, and then we place it into our answer. 15 goes into 70 4 times. 4 times 15 is 60. Subtract, we get 10. Bring down the 0. 15 goes into 100 6 times. 6 times 15 is 90. We subtract again and get 10. We bring down the next 0. You'll notice what's happening is we're going to continue to get 10 as our remainder. So 15 goes into 100 6 times. 6 times 15 is 90. We subtract and get 10 again. That's going to continue to go on and on. That's where we get our repeating decimal. When we have a repeating decimal and we write our answer, we have to write it using a bar notation. So 7/15 equals 0.46 with a bar notation over just the 6. Now we're going to try method 2, the calculator. On your calculator, type in 7 divided by 15 equals. Many of your calculators will have 0.466666, several 6's, but then it ends in a 7. This is still written 0.46 with a bar notation over the 6. Tomorrow in class, ask me what your calculator is doing so that there's a 7 at the end, and I'll explain it in class tomorrow. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to finish this part of the notes. To change a decimal into a fraction, write any whole numbers as whole numbers and the numbers after the decimal as the numerator of the fraction. The denominator is a 1 with zeros following it. The number of zeros is how many numbers were after the decimal point in the original problem. Copy this down. It may not make a lot of sense right now, but after we do a few examples, I bet it all makes sense to you. For example 3, it says to write 4 and 105 thousandths as a fraction in simplest form. Well, the 4 that's in front of the decimal point is going to be your whole number 4. The numbers after the decimal point, 105, are going to be your numerator, 105. The denominator is going to be a 1, and then you're going to follow that with 3 zeros because there were 3 numbers after the decimal point in the original problem. So our decimal is 4 and 105 thousandths. Now you're going to have to simplify your fractions. So you have to think about what goes into 105 and what goes into 1,000. Well, 5 goes into both of those. So you're going to divide your numerator by 5 and your denominator by 5. So you end up with 4 and 21 over 200. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to finish this part of the notes. Don't forget to write a question. I will be checking this in class tomorrow. Let's try example number 4. In a survey of next year's 7th grade students, 2,500 said they will come to school by bus. 524 said they will walk. 375,000 said they will come in a car. And 1/16 said they will ride their bicycle. Order the means of transportation from most used to least used. Now, in this situation, we have 2 numbers that are decimals, and then we have a couple of fractions. Our best bet is to change them all to decimals. Then it makes it very easy to compare the numbers. So we need to change 5/24 into a decimal. Use your calculator. Right now, take 5 and divide by 24 and record your answer. You should have gotten 0.2083333 repeating. So when you record it, you would write down 0.2083 with a bar notation over just the 3. Now you need to find the decimal for 1/16. So take 1 and divide by 16. Try that on your calculator. Record your answer on the paper. You should have gotten 0.0625. Now we're able to compare the numbers and put them in order from most used to least used. And use your decimals to figure this out. 0.375 is greater than 0.25, which is greater than 0.208, which is greater than 0.0625. So the means of transportation are in a car, by bus, walk, and finally bicycles. Pause the video at this time if you need more time to finish this part of the notes. Try the quick check problems on your own. I'd like for you to pause the video, do all of the quick check problems, then start the video again and check your answers. You are allowed to use a calculator to change any of the fractions into decimals. But when it comes to changing the decimals into fractions, I really want to see all of your work. Be sure on number 3 that you change your fractions into decimals before you compare them. Again, pause the video and do all the quick check. For number 1, the fraction of nitrogen in a chemical sample is 5/8. Write that fraction as a decimal. That is 0.625. For number 2, write 5/9 as a decimal. That's going to be 0.5 repeated, so it would be 0.5 with a bar notation. For number 3, write each decimal as a mixed number with a fraction in simplest form. The first one is 1.364. We would have a whole number 1 and then 364 over 1,000. 364 and 1,000 can both be divided by 4. So we end up with 1 and 91 over 250. For part B, we have 2 and 48 hundredths. 4 goes into both 48 and 100. So we end up with 2 and 12 25ths. C is 3 and 6/10. You can divide both by 2, so we end up with 3 and 3/5. For the last problem, it says in a survey, about 2/5 of the students prefer cats, 0.33 or 33 hundredths prefer dogs, 3/25 prefer birds, and 1500ths prefer fish. List the choices in order of preference. Well, we need to convert both fractions into decimals. 2/5 converts to 0.4 as a decimal. 3/25 is 0.12. So the order of preference is cats, then dogs, fish, and finally birds.